It's time for another Dirt Daily, and we are moving right along with the disassembly of my Jeep JL I call Newb sock. I've already pulled the front axle out. Most of the front suspension is out. Now we're moving to the rear suspension. This axle should be a Dana 35. Kind of not the best axle. Okay for a little sport Jeep on little tires, but I want to run 37s and I want to go wheeling. I want to beat on this thing a little bit. So this is going to go. Plus, I have a brand new set of Mopar 44s that have lockers in, 513 gears. That's going to replace all this and a brand new suspension. So these are going to leave. The front axle's already out. This one, let's go down the checklist. We're going to disconnect the drive shaft that runs up to the transfer case right there. We're going to disconnect these parking brake lines, cables, and then we will disconnect the speed sensor back here, if there is one. Looks like there is, and also the brake lines going to the rear calipers. The new axle has brakes already on it, so I just need the hoses off of the back. Hopefully it doesn't make a giant mess when I crack those lines off. So I may even just set the calipers up out of the way if it's not too much hassle, so that when I am disconnecting the brake lines, it's a pretty quick, short time that it's disconnected and not dripping and draining all the system out. After that, it will be shocks, links, rear track bar, rear sway bar. Basically anything that holds this thing to the Jeep is gonna go. Now, keep all your hardware. Most new suspensions reuse hardware, especially if it's on a newer vehicle. If it's on an old vehicle, you might get a new hardware kit. So let's dive right into this. I'm gonna pull the drive shaft out first and then move to the brake lines. You may be wondering if this drive shaft is reusable with the new axle. That's a good question. I don't know. I do know that I raised the Jeep up too high and I can barely reach the transfer case. I have not checked with the drive shaft maker to see if it's a size that they all use, or if the pinion length on the 44 is a little bit longer, maybe requiring a little bit shorter rear drive shaft. Or also the lift might also change how much drive shaft length you need. I have talked to my drive shaft guys over at Tom Wood's Drive Shaft, and they are on board to help us get some drive shafts on this thing as quickly as possible. So I want to get the axle in here and figure out drive shaft lengths so that we can get those ordered up. Why don't you? There it goes. Why won't you come out? What in tarnation's going on here? Maybe some spray? Oh. Disconnecting the parking brake cable can be a little tricky. My plan is to pull down on the cable until that little arm sticks out as far as it'll go, and then clamp my vice grips onto that arm right up against the caliper. And then that thing will unhook. And then take that off and it pops back in. Do the same on the other side. Now for getting this cable out of this bracket. This bracket, at the end of the cable, there's a fitting that it sticks through and then it kind of opens up. And when it opens up, it doesn't want to pull this back through that hole. If you look real close there, you can kind of see. So this is the trick for getting those out. Grab a wrench. This is a 13 millimeter. Slide it on over the cable. Slide it up so it pushes all the little tyings in. Thing comes right undone. And it's all reusable. You could get in there with a screwdriver and open them up a little bit if you had to, but they all feel just fine. Now you can reuse this. On the back side of the end of the axle here, you're going to take a 8 millimeter socket and reach back in there, and you're going to remove a little tiny screw that holds the speed sensor into the end of the axle. These speed sensors read a tone ring at each corner of the Jeep, and it tells the computer things like how fast the Jeep's going and stuff like that. All types of traction control, yada yada. The axles that I'm putting in have the speed sensor, has the speed tone ring, so I'll plug this back into those axles, but I will need to reprogram the ECU because it'll have 513 gears, so it'll have lower gears, and it'll also have bigger tires. So if I don't do that, the speedometer will probably be off. I was told you could go to the dealer, but I also have found a company that makes a programmer that I'm ordering, and when that gets here, I will show you how that works. But you don't want to just cut these wires and throw them away, no matter how many old Jeep guys will tell you speed sensors are useless. You probably want to keep these so that you can keep using them. Wow, this one's kind of dirty and has rust all over it. That's probably not a good sign. Let's do the other side. In the front, I disconnected the shocks early, and that was kind of a mistake. So, because everything kind of drooped out really quickly. So in the rear, I'm going to try and learn from my mistakes and disconnect the sway bar first, start taking the nuts off of all the link mounts and get it ready, remove the vent hose, remove everything, and then take the shocks off at the last minute. So let's get this sway bar out of the way. Whew, those fasteners are warm. Now, the sway bar is pretty much tucked up inside here. So I'm going to see if I can sort of work it out as it goes over the exhaust and in front of the shocks and behind these shocks. Oop. There it goes. Up and over and around and out. Sweet. I'm in here with some little channel locks and see if we can get the vent hose off. There it goes. Vent hose is off. Parking brake cables are off. Speed sensor is off. I think it's time to bring the whole car down. Maybe I'll remove the nut on the track bar while it's up here, and maybe remove the nut on the bottom links, and then I'll bring it down so I can kind of work up inside it a little bit more. I put the front axle on this little dolly. I'm going to lower the rear end down until it sits right in there too. That way all the old axles will be easy to get out of the way. I'm going to bring it down, disconnect lower links, upper links, track bar, shocks, and brake caliper. And it should be able to lift up and leave the axle sitting on the dolly. I think that might be about as close as we can get. See if we can come down a little bit more. Okay, let's get this brake caliper off first. Pulling the brake calipers off because I don't want to crack the brake lines just yet. I'll try and save that until we're really close to putting the new axle in. That way there's the least amount of brake fluid leaking and the least amount of brake bleeding needed. So this caliper, oh look at that. It like fits all the way up there on that arm. I'm gonna go do the other side, and then also while I'm over there, I'm gonna knock that upper track bar bolt out. Track bar is out. Next, remove the lower shock mount. Lower shock mount doesn't want to come out. Let's try the upper shock mount. A little bit ago, when I was removing the transfer case, I was giving the engineers at Jeep a hard time. So I feel like it's only right that when they do something that deserves props, I should give them props. Now, if you don't know what props means, it's kind of a technical term they use on a lot of the TV shows. When a camera guy does something really amazing, you throw them props. I had a camera guy, yeah, his name was actually Bing Bong, and that guy got props all the time. He was probably one of the top 4 camera guys in the world, and I would always like to remember to throw out props to Bing Bong, because it was kind of like a salutation, a salute to someone that really does something great. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove this upper shock bolt. And I give the engineers props because there's a threaded hole for that instead of you having to hold a wrench inside there. So I gave them a hard time the other day when that one bolt was impossible to get to, giving them props here when something just makes sense. Oh, and also props to Bing Bong. He's the best. This one off. with the shocks out. We are just about completely removed here. I'll do some sketchy double extension business. And one coil popped out. And then we come down to the bottom. Sweet. Copy the same on this side. There we go. Now if I raise the Jeep up, the axle should stay on this cart and we can start getting ready to put the new stuff in. We have one here that doesn't want to come out. What the heck's going on here? Stinker. That's it for this Dirt Daily. Both axles are out of Newb sock. I'm going to clean up all this mess, go take the dogs for a walk. Next time, putting new axles in this thing.